Back in the 1980s, Capcom primarily developed arcade titles such as 1942 and Street Fighter. They'd also made a few home console games, but up to this point, said console games were little more than ports of their arcade titles. This, however, was all set to change when they put together a six-person team to create a completely unique game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This game would become known as Mega Man. This team, led by Akira Kitamura, credited as AK, set forth initially to create an STG game where people could have fun blasting away at hordes of enemies. However, the checks that programmer Nobuyuki Matsushima, credited as HMD, put into the game used so much processing power that the game ran too slowly to be an STG. In particular, the hit detection routines were near glacial to what they would need to be for such a fast-paced game with so many enemies on screen. These limitations caused Mega Man to take on the more familiar platforming style of a side-screen scroller inspired by rock, paper, scissors that we know today. The intention was to have each boss be particularly weak to another boss's weapon, while other weapons did little to no effect. Such a game necessitated a gameplay style in which the player could choose the order in which to take on each level. This, of course, led to each of the 6 stages being built in a way that the player could choose it as their first stage and not get completely overwhelmed. Due to this, Kitamura set several rules for himself about enemy placement and terrain design. These rules allowed him to craft a progressively more difficult game, with levels that could still provide more challenge to more skilled players while not running off newcomers just because they started the wrong stage. This also allowed him to slowly ramp up the difficulty of the 4 Wily stages until the final challenge of Dr. Wily himself. In an interview in the Rockman Maniacs collection, Kitamura said that he usually comes up with the game system first when making a game, but not so with Mega Man. Before he ever started coming up with the game himself, he had a rough idea of what he wanted the world and the story to be. However, he didn't believe the story should interrupt gameplay, so he crafted it to be told outside of the game, on the back of the box and the instruction manual, so on. He also came up with the earliest designs for Mega Man, Roll, Dr. Light, and most of the Robot Masters, which Keiji Inafune, credited Inaf King, later came on board and finished up, adding his own unique style and inspirations. One of the things that stood out in the original Mega Man, for the time, was the visuals. In order to achieve these visuals, several methods were used. One such method was palette animation, which gave the illusion of animated background sprites by simply shifting the color palette rather than actually changing the sprites to create the animation. Other methods employed were using background layers to create large bosses such as Yellow Devil, or using 2 sprites to create Mega Man himself. Ultimately, what came out of this process was a game that released in Japan to moderate success, but sold poorly in the US, a fact which is often attributed to its atrocious box art here in the States. But it did well enough for Capcom to greenlight a sequel. That said, it's time to look at the game itself. As soon as you press start, you are dropped into the stage select screen and given the choices of Cutman, Gutsman, Iceman, Bombman, Fireman, or Elecman. There is no context whatsoever given as to who or what these things are. And from a story perspective, well, there is none. Okay, yes, obviously there is a story to Mega Man. The famous Dr. Light creates 6 robots known as the Robot Masters. They are specialized to help humanity to perform a variety of tasks, as well as 2 household robots he created for himself. His assistant, Dr. Wily, betrays him and reprograms the Robot Masters that Light had created in an attempt to take over the world. With no one to help, one of Dr. Light's household robots, named Rock, offers to help fight Wily by defeating the Robot Masters, then assaulting Wily's fortress, defeating the Mad Doctor himself. Light then turns Rock into the Super Fighting Robot, Mega Man, who then sets out to defeat the 6 reprogrammed robots and stop Wily's evil scheme. It's a straightforward plot, but not a word of it was spoken in the game itself, which was fine for the NES era. As I mentioned when talking about the game's development, the story was told through outside media, such as the manual in the back of the box. In fact, the only story you get in the game itself is at the end, with a small bit of text talking about Mega Man fighting for everlasting peace, and then a cutscene of Mega Man taking off his armor as he runs home to Roll and Dr. Light while the credits scroll. But this game is clearly all about the gameplay, and as far as the gameplay is concerned, well, this game clearly is the first game in the series. That's not to say it's bad by any stretch. In fact, I find that it's a very well-designed game, but it lacks the polish of the later games in the series. It's unfair to judge this game based on what came later, but at the same time, I think the difference is important to note, as well as the fact that this is the first game in the series. When people talk about design in Mega Man, they usually seem to be talking about Mega Man 2 and onward, and kind of forget this game exists. This game started a lot of trends that made Mega Man such a stellar franchise back at its height in the mid-90s, but it also perfected none of that. Each of the 6 stages has a theme: an electric tower, a polar base, a quarry, a waste incinerator, a Scissors Fortress, and the Jetsons. Yeah, Cutman and Bombman stages are fairly nondescript as far as theme is concerned. I think it's supposed to be a lumberyard and a military base, but Cutman stage especially looks nothing like a lumberyard. But I can kinda see what they were getting at with Bombman stage. These stages are all pretty straightforward and ultimately fairly easy once you understand the mechanics of the game, with just a few annoyances. For example, the general verticality of Electman stage doesn't work so well with the gameplay present in the classic Mega Man, as it makes jumps far harder than they need to be, especially if you don't have the weapons necessary to destroy the spines that zip back and forth across a lot of the platforms. The hallways between boss shutters are also a bit of an annoyance, forcing you to fight through a straight line of enemies, especially in Iceman and Fireman stages where the enemies are screw bombers lined up along the floor and ceiling. But none of this compares to the utter frustration that is Iceman stage. First of all, it's an ice stage, which in and of itself is a trial of pure frustration. However, on top of that, it includes an area of disappearing blocks which has spines zooming back and forth underneath them. That isn't what makes this stage so terrible though, because with just a bit of pattern recognition, these blocks are pretty easy to conquer. No. The truly terrible part of this stage comes immediately after, when you run into the footholders floating over a huge, bottomless pit. The footholders are pure evil. Not only do you have to land on them perfectly or else they damage you, but they also shoot projectiles in attempts to knock you off others of their kind. Now, those elements in and of themselves are not enough to make footholders so horrible. In fact, they're pretty manageable. That is, until you get to the end of the area to find out that the footholder you're standing on is too low for you to get across to the next part of the stage because they float randomly! Yes! You heard me! Randomly! Even if you are perfectly able to platform across these things, you may find yourself stuck and unable to finish the level due to pure bad luck. And of course, if you die while waiting to get to a position where you can continue the level, you spawn back at the beginning of the disappearing blocks section. Now you may be thinking, well, just use the magnet beam to get out, and trust me, I have a lot to say about the magnet beam later. But suffice it to say that with the magnet beam being an optional pickup in Electman stage requiring Gutsman's weapon to reach, it is more than likely that when you reach the footholders in Iceman stage, you won't have it in your possession. Hell, magnet beam's easy to miss altogether. But like I said, that's a discussion for later. Beyond these specific complaints, however, the main 6 stages are very well designed. They're not easy for beginners, but each of them can be fairly easily conquered with just a Mega Buster and a bit of skill and patience, with the additional weapons really just serving to make the path forward easier for you to defeat more and more of the Robot Masters. Speaking of the Robot Masters, we should probably go over them. When it comes right down to it, they're all pretty basic and straightforward. They all hit extremely hard, making it difficult to defeat the majority of them with just the Mega Buster. Elecman in particular will wreck Mega Man within seconds if you don't come in prepared. The game does, however, give a couple good ins for new players through Bomb Man and Cut Man. Cut Man in particular provides an excellent starting point for new players because he takes 3 bars of damage and recoils every time he's hit by the Buster. There is simply no need to memorize his pattern when you can just keep a constant barrage of Buster Fire on him and keep him in a loop. It's almost like another boss from the future. Bomb Man, on the other hand, does require a bit more pattern recognition, but his pattern's pretty easy to get down, and his hyper bombs are fairly easy to avoid when it comes down to it. The issue comes from the fact that these two are the only good starting bosses in the game, so it's highly likely that many first-time players will find themselves fighting a boss that tears Mega Man apart, leaving the player frustrated about what this game wants from them. This game is not a forgiving one, and I can see why there were complaints that it was too hard. With skill and patience, it's possible to get through the entire game with only the Mega Buster, but you'll be in for an extreme chore if you try it. However, on the flip side, the special weapons turn these nearly insurmountable boss fights into jokes. Each special weapon deals a lot of extra damage to a particular boss, and I mean a lot. Once you have a boss's weakness, you will likely tear through their health before they even get a good shot in at you by simply spamming the fire button. In fact, it's even possible to defeat them without moving from the spot you start the battle in. But killing Cut Man or Bomb Man and then falling into the game's weakness order does not make the game itself easy, because there are still 4 stages that open up as soon as you defeat the last Robot Master, which are designed to challenge Mega Man at the top of his game. The Wily stages bring together everything you've learned in the previous 6 stages to create a final gauntlet before the finish line. Overall, these stages are good. The platforming is challenging, the enemy placement is fair but tough, the bosses are far harder than the Robot Masters, but still a load of fun to beat. And the rematches with the Robot Masters themselves are a fun touch to show how powerful Mega Man has gotten throughout his journey. That said, there are still a few issues. Remember the Footholders and Iceman stage? Well, they're back. And this time there are spikes along the floor and ceilings, which means that their random paths can end up with Mega Man being forced to an instant death. Fuck these guys. Fuck them. As for the Wily bosses themselves, they're all fun. The first you come across is the infamous Yellow Devil. This guy and his subsequent incarnations in later games are well known for being painful. He comes flying in from off-screen in pieces, and once all the pieces are on screen, he forms into the Yellow Devil, takes a shot at Mega Man from a single eye, and then turns back into Yellow Devil bits and flies to the other side of the screen. The only point you can attack him is when his eye forms, so you have to dodge all the chunks of him that come flying in, then shoot him in the eye in order to damage him while trying to avoid the shots he takes at you. It takes 7 hits with his weakness to kill him, making him one of the hardest bosses in the game. This is unless you cheat. The Thunder Beam has an exploit where if you fire it and then repeatedly pause and unpause the game, it will read as a new hit every time the game unpauses. This makes the Yellow Devil pitifully easy to defeat, as long as you can get past the first barrage of Yellow Devil bits that come flying in from off-screen. In fact, this exploit works on almost all the bosses, allowing you to kill them even more quickly and easily than with their individual weaknesses. But like I said, that's cheating, and you wouldn't cheat. Would you? Wily Stage 2 sees you platforming across bottomless pits as you fight through enemies. The only frustrating part here is getting past the bladers at the very beginning, but the Thunder Beam is more than enough to take care of them no matter where they fly in from. The stage also gives you your first 2 Robot Master rematches against Cutman and Elecman. My biggest problem here is the fact that Cutman's room has no guts blocks in it. This means that you have no choice but to take him out with the Buster. So, if you used him as your first boss at the beginning of the game, you'll never get the opportunity to fight him using his weakness. Elecman, on the other hand, goes down pretty easily. Shoot him with 3 rolling cutters before he has a chance to hit you with 3 Thunder Beams and you're moving on. The main boss of this stage is the Copy Robot, which scans and produces an exact copy of Mega Man, complete with all his abilities. There honestly is not a lot to say about this boss. Its pattern is exactly Elecman's pattern, and it mimics your weapon choices. Stay on your toes and fire away. A quick trigger finger will take him down fairly quickly, allowing you to progress to Wily Stage 3. Wily Stage 3 is about as straightforward as a stage can get. The first area has you pass through several octo batteries until you reach an area where water comes in and whisks you directly to the boss with only a few pings and killer bullets to get in your way. The boss, CWU-01P, is actually several different robots that you fight in quick succession, and each time you destroy one, another faster one comes out to take its place. There are 7 in total, all of which are weak to the super arm, but there are only 4 guts blocks. That means you have to take out at least 3 of them with your standard buster. But once you take him down, you're at the final level of the game. This final stage is a relatively short one, taking you through a quick gauntlet of obstacles consisting primarily of spikes and watchers, which leads you to the final boss rush before your final showdown with Wily himself. The unfortunate thing is that once you defeat the boss rush, the game puts you into the Wily fight with nothing more than a single weapon refill item. So you're looking at losing a decent chunk of health fighting through the 4 remaining robot masters back to back, and then Wily himself is no cakewalk either. But if you can hold to your determination and throw yourself into the fray until you finish off both phases of Wily's battle, or just cop out and use the Thunderbeam exploit, you will finally have him begging for mercy at Mega Man's robotic feet. With that, Wily is defeated, the world is saved, and Mega Man heads home to be welcomed by Dr. Light and Roll. Mega Man was a game that was clearly a starting point for an entirely new genre. Capcom wanted a new game for its home console division, and they pulled together a team of talented artists and programmers to create something unique, and came out with a genuinely fun, if frustrating, game. However, this game did ultimately lay the groundwork for a formula that would go on to become one of the biggest icons in gaming through the 90s, and even now is remembered with a fondness that few franchises get after their deaths. And yes, Mega Man is, for all intents and purposes, a dead franchise. I think it's unlikely that we'll see a true revival from the Blue Bomber unless Capcom becomes desperate. But that's not what this series is about. It's not about asking for a new Mega Man game, or even predicting the future of the franchise itself. It's about looking into the history and content of the games and finding out where it all went wrong in the first place. So join me next time, as I take a look at what is argued to be the best Mega Man game of all time, Mega Man 2.